Oh, yeah. Well, it's how do we apply JFK's ideal of peace to end the Russian-Ukraine war? And along with that, I'd like to also add to that in the speech, he talks about peace as a process rather than just a state. We're either at peace or not. So what principles, I think, could we take from this speech that would help us to end the Russian-Ukraine war from your point of view? That's a question from Jeffrey.
I think, first of all, I agree that peace is a process, and we're well behind the power curve on the peace process right now. What can we take away from the speech? One of the interesting things of the speech is that from a history standpoint, we in many ways flipped the script when it comes to, when JFK spoke, for instance, he spoke about the, Soviet communism seeking to impose its will on people by force, and that we needed to say no to that, but we couldn't use that as an excuse not to pursue the processes of peace. But today, if you take a look at the Russian-Ukraine conflict, I think it's fair to say, I mean, look, Jens Stoltenberg just outright said, he's the Secretary General of NATO, so don't disagree with me, disagree with him when he says that one of the main reasons for this conflict is the expansion of NATO and the threat that Russia perceived from that. JFK also talked about, in this day and age of nuclear weapons, how we can't allow something to, a policy to go forward that puts a nation in the humiliation or faces an existential threat to its survival, so that it uses nuclear weapons as the last resort. When you think about what we're seeking to do collectively, us and NATO, vis-a-vis Ukraine, we speak of a Ukrainian victory that's tied to Ukraine taking control of territories that Russia believes belong to Russia. That the process of taking these territories, up to and including Crimea, would pose an existential threat to Russia that would automatically trigger a Russian nuclear response. We're doing the very things that JFK warned us about. And I think that it's imperative that we have to go beyond the Russian-Ukrainian war here and not look at it as the end all. It's a tragedy. This war is, should have been, and I believe could have been avoided had the United States and NATO undertaken different approaches, but we didn't. Here we are. Is Russia free from blame? That's a different debate. It doesn't matter. What matters is we're in a situation now that if we pursue our current policy to its logical conclusion, the world will end, cease to exist, because our policy to, if pursued to its logical conclusion, would mean that Ukraine recaptures Crimea, the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Russia fires all of its nuclear weapons and we all die. So I think we have to think beyond this. This war will end. It's not going to end any way that the supporters of Ukraine want it to end. That's a statement of fact. We could disagree on that if you want to. I'm pretty confident in my analysis, and it's being borne out as we speak. It would be nice if we could end this war in a way that allowed Ukraine to preserve as much of its territorial integrity as possible, that allowed it to retain sovereignty, that allowed it to retain national viability. It would be nice if this war could end with Ukraine retaining access to the Black Sea. These will all be nice things, and it could happen if the United States tones down its approach, if it stops pursuing what I believe is a nuclear suicide pill with this. But, this is beyond Ukraine. This is about, if you go back to, the lead up to this, Russia was talking about a new European security framework. Now, I know Jens Stoltenberg, members of NATO have taken exception to the notion of taking the military infrastructure back to 1997 lines. That's an extreme Russian position. Could it have been negotiated? Could we have been talked? We don't know because we didn't try. We shut it down from the very start. But that is Russia's objective. Russia's objective was never the destruction of Ukraine. It was to keep Ukraine out of NATO and to work with NATO and the United States to create a new European security framework, which is sort of what JFK is talking about. Negotiations, treaties, learning how to live together mutually. And I think that's what we need to start focusing on. We need to start focusing on a post-Ukrainian reality and how we can turn a post-Ukraine reality into a vehicle that can lead to peaceful coexistence between the United States, Europe, and Russia. Because right now we're not. We're solely focused on the war in Ukraine, on conflict termination, on conditions that are unrealistic and unattainable. And if we were to seek to attain them, we require even more violence, more war, more death, more destruction, and probably end with a general nuclear exchange that would kill all people. So I think we have to go beyond Ukraine if we're talking about achieving peace. This war is a reality, and we have to accept this reality. We have to accept that we're not going to get from this conflict what we want to get. We're going to have to accept the fact that Ukraine is not going to get what it wants to get, because if we seek to get what we want to get, what they want to get, what we think they want to get, the world ends. And I think that I say that keeping the world intact is a far greater priority than trying to resolve decades, centuries of Ukrainian-Russian animosity. The part two of that question, I think, also talked about China. Absolutely, we need to nip this mad rush to war with China in the bud, and we have to start talking about engaging with China responsibly, respectfully, and in a manner that reduces tension, reduces the possibility of conflict. Right now, we're putting all our eggs in the confrontation basket. We're emphasizing military outcomes, and that's the exact opposite trajectory that JFK spoke of in his speech.
Yes, I see in the chat that someone had asked about organizing citizen diplomacy, and someone mentioned that Sharon Tennyson, who founded an organization called Center for Citizens Initiative, was very involved in making trips to Russia, bringing citizens there, and also bringing citizens back. And as far as I understand, that work is continuing. So that might be something for someone to look into who's interested in that.